And welcome to the Two-Wheel Revolution here on ThinkTechHawaii.com. I'm Peter Rosegg, I'm your host, and we're going to be talking to Natalie Iwasa, also known as the Bike Mom, in a segment called You Better Listen to the Bike Mom. So stick with us, we're going to have an interesting half an hour. I am Peter Rosegg. I'm the host here at ThinkTechHawaii.com for a show we call the Two-Wheel Revolution about bicycling, e-bikes, e-scooters, e-skateboards, e-unicycles, and even electric wheelchairs. Eventually, we're all going to be using them anyhow. So I have a terrific guest today, Natalie Iwasa, known as the Bike Mom, person that's been involved in following biking here for in Hawaii for a long, long time. So Natalie, aloha and welcome.
Aloha, and thank you for having me, Peter.
So you've been on ThinkTech many times. As I mentioned, you seem to have more followers than I do. So let's just jump right in. And you've been watching and observing and part of the biking scene here, Honolulu and Hawaii, for quite a long time. I've found some testimony from you from over a decade ago, and I'm sure longer. So tell us, what was it like when you first started to observe biking? What were the good things? What were the bad things about when you started out?
Well, I guess, first of all, a little history. I've been biking for just about my entire life. And so one of the things I've noticed here versus like on the mainland, for example, is that you have to really be careful about the drivers. So I have two sons who are 24 and 20 now, but my activism in bicycling actually got started when I started thinking about my boys, because I would take them on my bike. I had the seat in the front. I had one boy in the back that I would have join to my bike. And I knew that eventually they would not be riding with me and I would not have control over what they did or where we went. So when I was riding, I would see things, like we didn't have as many bike lanes back then. We didn't have sharrows. I mean, that just didn't exist. And riding to school was difficult as well. So, we've made actually a lot of improvements over the last 20 years.
So that's exactly what I want to talk to you about. How would you say it has improved? Bicycling has improved in that time?
Well, we have more bike lanes, we have now things like the cycle track, the protected bike lanes, King Street, Pensacola, certain areas in town, and then better markings. I think there are better markings. The city has been especially attentive to bicycling needs. So, for example, down on Pi'ikoi, we have, right turn only except bicyclists. Bicyclists can go through the intersection. Those types of changes have been made over the last, 10 years or so.
And what about drivers? Since you mentioned them, I'm sure if we were talking to a bunch of hardcore drivers, they'd say the problem is the bicyclists and people on any kind of personal mobility will see it from a different angle. Has the attitude, you think, of drivers changed at all in this time?
That's a little more age, I think, because there are, and it's just a few, but, when a bicyclist and a motorist have an incident, it tends to stick in the mind longer. We don't tend to remember those good times when somebody allowed us to get into the lane or some wait for us to pass. Same thing with pedestrians, right? So I think it's just harder to gauge that. But I know that there's been more of an effort to educate motorists. Mm-hmm. You might be familiar with the 3-foot rule, where motorists are supposed to allow at least 3 feet from their vehicle to the bicyclist. And so that's, I think, made a little bit of improvement. But I think there are still a lot of people out there who don't know about that law.
I'm sure you're right about that. And as I talk to people, and even I myself, when I'm going to make a left turn off of King Street, and I have to, slow down, have to look both ways because of the bike lane there. I think most of us kind of go, "Oh, shoot, I gotta be careful here." which for some people seems to be a great imposition, and for some people seems to be, yeah, that's not bad. Let's all be more careful here. We've certainly seen a number, pedestrian accidents, especially recently, which we all wish they'd been a little more careful about. So, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's very true. Go ahead.
All right. Well, okay. Let's start back a little bit. You've mentioned that you started out in this in bicycling thing when you had younger kids, and you were 20 years ago. We won't number those years, but tell us a little bit more about yourself generally, and just you're a pretty well known person in this community, but I'm not sure my 4 dedicated listeners will know who you are.
Well, I've been in Hawaii for over 30 years. My husband is from here. My young boys are no longer that young. They're young adults.
Mm-hmm.
My youngest actually likes to motorcycle, but he used to ride his bike. I give him so much credit. He used to ride his bike from Hawaii Kai to the Buddhist Academy to school 4 days a week. So, bicycling is in the family. I'm also a CPA, so I have my own practice, and that's really what allows me a lot of flexibility in my schedule and allowing me to testify down at the city council and down at the state legislature. I pay attention to a lot of bills that come up. And I think one of the turning points for me was back in 2007 when I first heard about safe routes to school.
Mm-hmm.
The state had a pot of money. I want to say like $6 million. It might have even been more than that. And I just thought that was the greatest thing, because what Safe Routes to School tries to do is create safer routes, bicycling and pedestrian, for kids to get to school. And so I jumped on that bandwagon right away and tried to help people, get grants and that kind of thing. We still lag in that area.
Right.
That's really kind of what started it for me.
Okay. So did you choose the name Bike Mom, or did somebody pin that one on you, like pin the tail on the donkey? So how did that come about?
That's an interesting story. So I used to, when I started my firm back in 2003, I would go to the neighborhood board meetings, and there was a sergeant there who later became a captain and now is retired. But he would see me riding up on my bike, and he'd say, "Oh, here comes the bike lady." And oh, well, I have a young boy now, and you should really call me the Bike Mom. And so that just kind of stuck.
All right. That's no lady, that's the Bike Mom. So terrific. I'm glad it's something that you chose and didn't get chosen for you. So, and we're not going to talk about rail, but are you on the HART board now, or what's the status of that?
Yes, I've been on the HART board for a little over 2 years.
Okay. Well, we all want somebody to be looking out for that thing. So we're glad you're there. And I know you've commented and watched that very closely. You're also related to Cycle on Hawaii. Is that, what's that?
Oh, yeah. So thank you for asking. So Cycle on Hawaii is an advocacy group. It's a nonprofit, charitable nonprofit. And we actually do things that Hawaii Bicycling League doesn't really get into. Hawaii Bicycling League is a membership organization. Mm-hmm. We're just a small nonprofit, and we support things like Safe Routes to School. We sponsor the Bike to School days in the fall. There's springtime, fall walk to school. So we try to get groups going, and I lead usually certain routes on that particular day. So we also have parades, like the 4th of July, we had several, or the Christmas parade in Hawaii Kai, we try and do that. So it's kind of more for kids and families, and trying to kind of motivate them to get out and ride their bike in a situation where they feel like they're not going to be run over.
I hear that.
And they can still have fun.
Yeah. I guess Hawaii Kai is probably, if you get back off the highways, probably one of the better places to bicycle. You have traffic, obviously, but you have fairly wide roads and fairly open areas there. Is that right?
Yeah, in Hawaii Kai itself, there is it's generally a good place to bike. There are bike routes along Kalaniana Oli Highway. They have the bike lanes, and then it's one of my favorite places is actually Kamilanui Valley. That's back where the farmers are, the nurseries and that kind of thing. It's a little bumpy, but it's just quiet and pleasant, and it's nice to ride back there. So
is that the one where you go up kind of on I could call it the right side on the down the Eva side, so to speak, of Hawaii Kai, and you get to a gate and stuff like that? Is that where we're talking about, or?
Well, so if you go back into like Mariners Cove, the road kind of winds around, and then you go on it's a private road. It was meant to be a link for Hawaii Kai Drive, but they never
they never finished it.
And we actually put a stop to that. So yeah.
Okay. Not enough concrete is out there already, I think, in neighborhoods like that. So that's terrific. But it's not a membership organization, you're saying. So you're not recruiting people to join up, or how does that work?
Right. It's just like I said, every now and then we'll have small events. And so what we do when we have the Bike to School Day, for example, is I'll go send notices around to the schools in East Honolulu, and whoever has the highest percentage of participation, then we try to get donations, and then give them $100 or $50. The teacher that has the highest participation will get a check along with it's made out to the school and the teacher usually, and they for school supplies or whatever they want. So it's just kind of a little nice motivation.
Yeah, that's terrific. I wish more people were just involved on that kind of level with getting things. You don't have kids in school anymore, but you're still pushing that angle of things. So that's terrific. So let's think about the future now. What could we do? What would you like to see happen that would improve the ability of people to bicycle, e-bikes, and that sort of thing, to get more people out of their big SUVs or out of their cars and get them onto bikes?
Well, that's a really good question. So I think, first of all, it's and this might come as a surprise to some people, but it's kind of protecting what we have and not making things worse. And by that, I mean paying attention to potential bills. So, for example, I saw one just last night that would that would prohibit commercial vehicles that are larger than 10,000 pounds from traveling in the right lane. From traveling in the left lane. Oh. So that would mean they would be forced to ride in the right lane, which is right next to the bike lane or maybe to a sidewalk. Mm-hmm. And for years, I've been asking organizations such as the Trolley, Roberts Hawaii, tour buses. I say, hey, you guys should have a policy that if you're coming up on a bicyclist in the bike lane, they should be in the middle lane or the left lane, so they don't have to be so close when they ride past the bicyclist, because you probably know that when you have a bigger vehicle like that and it's going faster, there's a little bit of wind drag. Right. And it's very intimidating for some bicyclists to be passed by such a large vehicle. So I sent in testimony opposing that. Came up a few years ago and I opposed it and it died. So I'm hoping the same thing will happen this year.
Let's hope.
Sometimes it's protecting what we have. Mm-hmm. Just aren't made worse.
Yeah, that I didn't realize that was happening. You're absolutely right. I mean, those trolleys they're kind of open airish, and there are people kind of hanging out of them, and there's one of those things going by over your left shoulder would be pretty intimidating.
Yes.
So, what else? What else? We got to protect what we've got. That's important. What else do we need to do to make Honolulu specifically, or Hawaii in general, a better place for people to bicycle?
Well, I think the city is on the right track with respect to what they're doing, complete streets. So I think it's it's in sometime in the next few days, or maybe it's tonight, when they are going to have another virtual meeting for complete streets on Keamoku.
Keamoku, right.
And so if you're familiar with that area, that's down by Ala Moana Shopping Center, between Kapiolani and Baratania. It's a very busy street. And a few years ago, they put in, I think it was at Makaloa, they put in the barn stands intersection for pedestrians.
Mm-hmm.
Really makes, I think, a big difference, because then you don't have people crossing and potentially cars turning and whatever. But the complete streets takes into consideration bicyclists. And so they're going to be putting in, I believe, a protected bike lane there. And, it's things like that will make it better for bicyclists and pedestrians. And actually, it's supposed to improve traffic or the roadway conditions for all users, because have sometimes, people speed, and if they're speeding through areas like that, that's really not good for anybody, because that's when crashes happen or people aren't paying attention. So if there's more activity on the street, people tend to pay attention more. And so we have hopefully less distracted driving and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's, a lot of our Japanese visitors are bicycling or walking along that stretch between Ala Moana and Walmart and Ross's and so forth. And, they're a little less attuned to the traffic here and more used to what they may be experiencing at home, which can be bad, but is very respectful of bicyclists in some areas. So I think that we've got to keep that part in mind too when we talk about Keamoku. So, and what else? I'm going to keep pressing you until you tell me that's all I can think of. But so we need to improve those safe streets. We want to have more of this kind of. Obviously, the best bike lane is a protected bike lane. What about education? What can we do? We've talked a little bit about educating both drivers, and we need to think about cyclists. What can we do to improve the bike education we've got going on?
Well, the Hawaii Bicycling League already has an education program. They get a grant from the city to do education with fourth graders. Sometimes I think they go up to fifth grade, and they actually take the kids out on the road. They spend about 4 days with them, and they take them out on well, first of all, they train them on like the parking lot or the playground and the rules, and then they spend time where they actually go around in the neighborhood. And so that's really a good way to get kids participating and teach them what the rules are and how they should be riding. For example, they shouldn't be riding against traffic. They need to stop before the white line or at the stop sign. So they go over all these rules. They also have, I believe, an adult education program, which is important because, some people, when they retire, maybe they want to get back into bike riding and they have forgotten what the rules are. Some people think that there are different rules for bicyclists versus motorists, which there are a few, but there aren't really very many.
Right.
So it's good to have a refresher that way. For the motorists, when I see somebody does something like the bus or the trash pickup guys, if it's a city vehicle, I let the city know. And so they're really good. Mike Formby, he's the managing director. I contact him and I say, hey, Mike, your drivers, some of them are not paying attention to that 3-foot rule. And really, they should be allowing more like 8 feet because they're bigger. And so I give him the truck number and the time and place. And so he says, hey, okay, thanks for bringing that to my attention. I'll talk to our drivers about that. And, so there are multiple ways for education to get out there. I think where we're probably lacking is just in general motorist education.
Yeah.
So what I would like to see is more of an emphasis on educating motorists when they have to take their driver's license exam. What are the rules for bicyclists? When do I have to watch out? What should I do? I mean, even though it's not required, what is the best way for me to drive when I see a bicyclist or a pedestrian? And, I think if we had more of that, we would have fewer incidents or close calls on our roadways.
Yeah. Hawaii's roads are so, many of them are so problematic because there's not enough space. There was just a discussion in the newspaper about merging on the freeway, and the rule is you're not supposed to stop, but of course there are ramps where you have no choice but to stop. So what seems like a natural rule for the mainland may not work here. We've got tight circumstances. So I think I'd like to see exactly what you're describing is more rules that really relate to what people experience here, and make that part of getting your driver's license or renewing your driver's license. Make it part of the handbook that everybody passes around till they're dog-eared while they're getting ready to take their exams and stuff. That would be terrific.
Well, so to clarify, there are some questions in there, but I think there should be more of an emphasis on that.
Got it. And I want to commend you. I think, some people would say, well, the trash guys or the bus, I mean, they've got a difficult job. I don't want to call them out. I don't want to get anybody in trouble. But, on the other hand, if nobody says anything, then whatever the thing that's wrong is just continues to be wrong and maybe gets worse. And, God forbid, at some point in the future, there's an accident and if you're the cause of that, or if you're involved in that as a driver or whatever, that's going to haunt you for the rest of your life. So I think it helps to, in a nice way, and not to get anybody into trouble, but here's what I saw, and please help us improve it. And Mike Formby is a good guy to contact, I guess.
Yeah. So, and that's a good point, because I think the culture here generally is that we don't want to call anybody out. We don't want to make people feel bad. So with a lot of my stuff, I really go for balance. And so the way I do that is when somebody has really done a great job, they've seen me coming, because I have a mirror, so I can tell where they are, what they're doing behind me. Sure. And they go into the next lane and pass me. So there's like 15 feet between me and the vehicle. And then they put their blinkers on and they get in front of me. They allow plenty of room to pass me. I'm on a bus route. So this happens to me every day. Then I send in the same form, but I say commendation, and I say, give this driver a gold star today because this happened on this time, this place, and this bus. And, wow. So the other thing is that takes time, but the other thing I do is I give people a shaka. Hey, thanks for letting me in. Yeah. So it's kind of, we want to balance things out. We want to make sure that people don't feel bad. Sometimes motorists just don't see a bicyclist because they're looking for us, or maybe we're at fault because we don't have bright colors on. I mean, I've heard people say, did you see that bicyclist? They had a black shirt on, and it's almost nighttime. How is anyone going to see them? So, it's kind of, some of this goes both ways, actually, and trying to be cognizant of all that.
That's good. And that's terrific. I mean, if everybody took that balanced view and said, I'm going to praise them when they do good, and I'm going to, let them know when they haven't, I think we'd all be in a better shape in a lot of respects. So that's terrific. The number of e-bikes, as I'm sure is growing tremendously. There were figures in the newspaper recently. The number of e-bikes from 2021 to 22 went multiplied by 3 or 4 times. And in the first few months of this year, we already had more of the registrations that go into the city, had more registrations in the first 2 months of this year than in all of last year. And it's clearly something that's coming up more and more. Do you see is there a conflict between regular bicyclists and e-bikes, or how does that, in our narrow little bike lanes, what do you think's going on there?
Yeah, that's really a good question. And it's something that we have to really start dealing with, because I know that there were attempts to put definitions into the law like a decade ago, and it wasn't a big thing, and so it didn't get in there. But with the number now increasing, more and more people riding them, I even see kids on e-bikes riding to school, high school.
Yeah.
So we need to define what those vehicles are. There are a lot. There's electric assist, there's the full electric, we have all these other self-mode transportation vehicles. We need to define that and figure out who is going to be using what space and how they're going to be using it, because some of them can actually go quite fast. Right. So if you have an e-bike that's coming up on a traditional bicyclist who's pedaling, the speed difference can be kind of great. And we have to make sure that that e-bike behind passes just like any other regular vehicle and allows enough space. Mm-hmm. So, I think we have to have this discussion. I haven't heard it yet, but we definitely need to start talking about it and planning for it.
Yeah, and it's not just bicycles, as we've discussed. There are e-scooters now, especially in some of the areas like Waikiki and Kaka'ako. There are going to be more of them, one way or the other, whether it's a shared system or an ownership system. There are skateboards now that are electrified. There are these unicycles, and there's all kinds of stuff going, and they all have different speeds, as you pointed out, and different capabilities in terms of how they can be stopped and so on. And so I think, I hope not, but I think we're heading, unless we do set up some rules and regs, we're heading for some conflicts there. I know there are a few bicyclists that they kind of look down on e-bicyclists, but when we have all these different modes of personal transportation, we're all going to have to learn to live together, because they're all going to be, they're all going to be on the street with us. So I think you're absolutely right. That's pretty important. So I'm going to give you the final question is what I usually call my blank check question. If I could give you all the money you needed to do something, one thing, what would you do as bike queen?
Well, I guess I'm partial to safe routes for kids and schools, because I see so many kids who are being driven to school, even if it's just half a mile, because the parents don't want them to walk across Kalani on a Ole Highway. So they drive. And of course, that adds to the congestion for everybody. So if I had a blank check, I think what I would do is I would create safe routes for every school, and probably within a 5 to 7 mile range from every school, and just have a very strong network that kids, teachers, parents, we could all use to get around.
Okay, I'll send you the check. It's going to be blank.
Oh, thank you.
Sure. But Natalie, thank you so much. This has been so interesting. I usually close these shows with what I call a micro-mobility moment. And sometimes it's wacky new devices, and sometimes it's safety. I'm going to take a moment and read something here that's just come across my desk. And it is about electric bikes. And we do have an electric bike credit here in Hawaii, but there was going to be one in the National Inflation Reduction Act, and it got left out. But a new one has been proposed at the national level. It's called the Electric Bicycle Incentive Kickstart for Environment, which of course spells e-bike. It's been introduced in the U.S. House by Representative Jimmy Panetta from California, by caucus chair Earl Blumenauer by Mike Thompson and Adam Schiff. They're all California, Oregon and California representatives, but it would give a $1,500 incentive to up to about $8,000 bike for people. And I think that we've seen in places like Colorado, these really help people to get e-bikes and to get a good e-bike and get one that's got quality. So if you're at all interested in that, you should talk to our own representatives, send a word to people like Jimmy Panetta and Adam Schiff and say we support it, because I think it standing by itself, it's going to be challenging to get that through Congress, but it would be a big help. So with that, that's my micromobility moment for this week. And thank you, Natalie, so much. I really appreciate it. In the future, we'll have you back again and we'll talk about how things are progressing. But thank you again. And thank you to everybody for spending this half hour talking about the two-wheel revolution. Aloha.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.